I have the enormous privilege of being able to introduce Michael Hudson, an enormous influence on me, and I think one of the most important economists today. He is the president of the Institute for the Study of Long-Term Economic Trends. He was a Wall Street financial analyst, a distinguished research professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and the author of many books. And he and Radhika also host a show together that I am honored to host over at Geopolitical Economy Report. So with that said, Michael, the floor is yours.
I want to talk primarily about the political points and the analytic frame that Radhika has used. And I think the basic theme of her book is that what used to be socialism has been replaced by a very technocratic view that avoids looking at today's economic polarization between the 1% and the 99% in terms of class interests. She focuses as I do, on the financial interests that have replaced industrial capitalism as the organizing force. In today's capitalism is very different from what occurred in Marx's day and what he was analyzing, and the world has not turned out as optimistically as Marx had hoped that industrial capitalism would evolve into socialism. Instead of advocating the socialization of infrastructure, you have today's social democratic parties advocating sort of a public-private partnership. Now, Radhika's point is that this kind of partnership is not really going to have much for the public sector, except, as they say, in socializing the losses and privatizing the profits and the financial gains. But if you look at public health, education, credit creation, what used to be social democratic and Labour parties have turned Thatcherite. They've followed the British Labour Party and going even more to the technocratic rights. And largely, this is because finance has become the core. Now, this is difficult to fit into most people's class analysis of society because finance is not a class issue as such. Marx pointed out that interest-bearing debt and bank money creation are external to the economy of production and consumption. They're imposed on it. And that's why he said economies don't need a rentier class. Economies don't need a landlord class. They don't need a banking class. And the role of industrial capitalism to Marx was to get rid of the rent-seeking classes, to get rid of the landlords, to get rid of the monopolists and get rid of the predatory banking, and basically to make all of this part of the industrial economy. And instead, that hasn't worked. And the socialist movements have not analyzed how seriously this has not worked. And really what's at issue is what is exploitation today, and how has it gone beyond what the traditional left has analyzed? And that's, I think, what Radhika's focusing on. Labor is not only exploited by being employed and having the employer, the capitalist, sell its products at a markup. Today, labor is exploited by having to go into a lifetime of debt if it wants to buy a home of its own, or to get an education, to get a job, or to borrow to buy a car to drive to the job, or to pay for the medical bills. All of these things that were expected to be socialized. And under a rentier economy that's dominated by the banks and landlords and monopolists, you do have a rentier class that obtains income at the overall economy's expense and is not part of it. That's why I'm very dubious about the idea of measuring American versus China's economic power in terms of GDP, since a large part of Radhika's book is how societies have coped with the virus, the coronavirus, look at the fact that in the United States, medical care and healthcare is 18% of GDP. This is more than any other country. In other countries, it could be maybe 5% of GDP. It's much lower in China. So all of this is what I think of as empty GDP. It's rent-seeking, it's exploitative, it's unnecessary costs, what Marx called the faux frais, the false costs of production. So it's bloat. And do we really want to say, well, America's beat China in the race to have a bloated economy? The largest part of the American GDP turns out to be rent-seeking classes. The rising in the price of housing is counted as part of GDP. Interest charges are part of GDP. If you're making a you're late in your credit cards and your interest rate goes up from 19% to 30%, that's all added to GDP. America's winning that part of the GDP race, but it's empty GDP, and China's success is doing what a good industrial capitalist country was supposed to do, and avoiding this bloat, avoiding the whole kind of superstructure of financialization that has prevented the United States from actually competing with China. There's no way that somehow the United States can say, we're going to isolate China, and that's going to enable us to go back to producing our own cars and consumer goods and chips. Nothing is going to enable the United States to do it because of its high financial costs, its high real estate costs, its high healthcare costs, and its monopoly costs. It's painted itself into a corner. And that's what somehow the left has been part of this process, because it's ignored the role of rentier wealth. And it focuses on industrial conflict between employers and their workers, and that certainly is a very important point, but it misses the big point, the sort of vulgar Marxist view that really came out of Stalinism was just capitalists are exploiters, not the state, not any other class. And the technocratic reformers have looked at all of this in terms of profit. I'm very wary of comparing the profits of American industry to profits of other countries, because the aim of a corporation in America today is not to make a profit. It's to make absolutely no profits at all. Everything is expensed and counted as part of GDP, so that there's no income tax on profits. They do this by offshore accounting, by offshore banking centers, by fake costs like depreciation for real estate. If you look at the actual statistics of what goes into how the GDP sausage is made, you find quite a different picture than you get. And what's really at issue is what's going to be the role between government and the financial sector and the industrial sector. And I think toward the end, at the end of the book, Radhika makes the points of let's compare the analysis that she's using and that I use to what other people that represent what's called the left are saying. She quotes Maria Mazzucato is urging a private-public partnership for greater efficiency without profit. But profit's supposed to be the aim of the private sector. What is the private sector after? And when it makes a deal with the government, a public-private partnership like Thames Water, you have in Thames Water nearly bankrupt. But it's made a fortune for its privatizers by going bankrupt. Under finance capitalism, you make a profit by driving a company bankrupt and leaving it as a shell. Thames Water borrowed an enormous amount of money. what did it use the money for? It did not use it to produce clean water and make a capital investment in fixing the leaks in all of its water pipes or doing what it promised to do. It borrowed money and it paid it to itself as a dividend, as a special dividend, as management fees. It borrowed money, paid to itself, leaving a bankrupt shell in its wake. This is how the savings and loan associations were looted in the 1980s, for instance. And there have been a lot of studies about how making money financially, because finance in the West is primarily predatory, making money by finance leaves the whole economy as an emptied out shell where there's an enormous amount of debt that's owed by the economy at large to maybe the 1% of the financial class that still isn't looked at as a financial class and leaves the economy uncompetitive as an industrial economy. That's what China is trying to avoid, and that's really the task before Russia, before other countries. And I'm surprised that Mazzucato didn't discuss someone like Simon Patton. He doesn't appear in today's discussions very much, but he was America's first economics professor at the first business school, the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania in the 1880s and 1890s. And Simon Patton said that public infrastructure should be looked at as a fourth factor of production, government spending, but the aim of this factor of production is not to make a profit. It's not trying to make wages or rents or profit, capital. It's trying to help the rest of the economy make higher real wages, higher profits for capital by providing the basic needs, education, transportation, public health at a loss. And if the government's role in infrastructure is to provide public health at a loss, then corporations don't have to pay it. And if they provide transportation at a loss, then labor doesn't have to bear the cost of transportation in getting to work. The capitalists don't have to bear the cost of transportation. The whole idea of public infrastructure, of socializing medicine, socializing education, socializing transportation and communications is to help industrial capitalism. And that's why it was the industrial capitalists themselves in the United States, in Germany, in every successful industrial company that moved towards socializing the basic needs in order to create a low-cost economy that could undersell and compete with other capitalist economies more efficient. And the more efficient economy would be the one that can undersell its opponents by being more socialist than they were. And that's what led Marx and the socialists in the 19th century to think, well, industrial capitalism is going to evolve into socialism. Their assumption was that industrial capitalists would act in their own self-interest. That hasn't happened. That what has happened is a financial capitalism that is not in the self-interest of the dynamic of industrial capitalism. It's become something entirely different. It's become a rentier, a financialized society. It's become what we call finance capitalism instead. And the victory of finance capitalism is basically to undo the whole industrial capitalist revolution to free economies, to free markets from the landlords, from the banks, from the monopolists, and produce a low-cost economy. That was the whole idea of efficiency, that socialism was supposed to be efficient by creating its own markets. And I think Radhika makes that point very clearly in her book. I think she's a little unfair when she critiques MMT. I think her discussion is too partial. And as one of the founders of MMT, I have to point out what I mean by it and what most of us mean by it. Its point, it doesn't discuss class interests as such. That's Radeka's critique, and she's absolutely right. It's not a doctrine of class interest. It's a doctrine of how money creation works. And its point is that government money creation is no more inflationary than private sector lending to finance the budget deficit. The government's running a budget deficit, pump money into the economy, and every economy needs money and credit to operate on. And if the government does not provide this credit by running a budget deficit, then the economy is going to have to do what it did in the late years of the Bill Clinton administration. It's going to have to borrow from the commercial banks and at interest and at enormous interest, and it's going to have to do what banks lend money for, and that is things that help the financial sector, not that help the industrial economy grow. So MMT is a way of government controlling the allocation of credit, the allocation of resources, and foreign forward planning. And if the government does not take the lead as planner, then the neoliberal idea of getting rid of government means a kind of privatization. It means that the center of planning is going to be in Wall Street and the financial sectors. That's what the libertarian philosophy is. It's central planning, much more centralized than any democratic government, because it's centralized in the hands of the 1%. The libertarians and the neoliberal left want a centralized planning in the hands of the wealthy people, because they say most wealth is created financially. So if we want an efficient economy, let's create wealth. And you can create much more wealth financially by cannibalizing an industrial firm than actually investing in industry. So the whole point of MMT is, how is money created by the government? Well, that's not the whole of MMT analysis, because it's true that Stephanie Kelton, who she criticizes, doesn't discuss class interest in the talk. And she just explains what it is, what money creation is. But MMT, we've gone around the world together, and her role is to give the introductory technical discussion of MMT. And then my role is to come on second and say, the key is, what are you going to create money for? You can create money in the way that Donald Trump and Vice President Dick Cheney created money. You can create money to go to war. You can create money to bail out the banks, as Obama did. You can create money for tax cuts, as Trump did, or you can create money by actually spending money on infrastructure, on labor, on employment, on socially productive forms of investment. So this is the whole point of the MMTers, is that money should not be created for the use by the financial sector to do what Radeka quite rightly criticizes the financial sector for. Money should be created by the state to promote economic growth. That is what has enabled China's economy to become so much more efficient than the US economy, because it's treated money as a public utility. It is not commoditized money, like occurs in the United States and in the West, and as the neoliberal left wants to do. It's treated, if the government creates money, then it can decide, what do we want to create money for? To lower the economy's cost of production, to increase capital investment, to become economically independent, as China's become independent. And I like the comment before that was made about Huawei. The United States has imposed sanctions on China, thinking that, well, if we impose sanctions on Russia and China, then they're going to be crowded out this field. And what they don't realize is that imposing sanctions on a country has the same effect as this country enacting protective tariffs on itself. It forces the country either to become self-sufficient or to become dependent on the United States that would love to monopolize computer chips and high technology and as intellectual property rights to yield monopoly rent. And what happens that countries, obviously, the global majority today realizes they need to avoid becoming dependent on rent-seeking the United States by being independent in essentials. And so everything that the West, the United States and Europe imposes as a sanction ends up losing this market forever. Because once other countries become independent, creating their own computer chips or whatever technology you're using, they don't need to import anymore. Now, the point has been made that China has been spending more money on importing computer chips than on importing oil. Well, just imagine, this whole market has been lost to the United States and Europe. And that means that instead of successfully consolidating control and centralizing it in the United States, companies and companies that are under U.S. Control, it's lost the market. It's lost everything forever. And that is the basic dynamic that Radhika and I talk about in our programs. And I think that's the basic dynamic that she described in the book. Why hasn't the left realized that this is the way to go? Why have they suddenly let themselves be hijacked? I think, and indeed, to save the rest of society from this, what is really important in understanding economy, that I think is what the book is a great contribution for. And to me, that's the whole point of it. I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.